Noni Madueke to Arsenal could actually be happening. And we're going to talk Rodrygo as well as Ethan Nwaneri on today's live episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. Let's get into it. Hey, everybody. How are we doing? Happy Sunday and welcome back to another live episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast with me, your host, Harry Symeou. We've got a fair bit to get into. There's been a lot of transfer talk around Arsenal so far this summer. Not a great deal of kind of getting things over the line as far as Arsenal are concerned. And I don't mean that in a sort of moany, wanting to complain kind of way. But, you know, the reality is the only signing we've had announced is that of Kepa Arrizabalaga, the backup goalkeeper that we've signed for £5 million. We still haven't got anything on Zubimendi yet, although Hand of Arsenal is saying that that announcement could come today. So we'll keep an eye out for that, of course. Christian Norgaard, not done yet, as far as we're aware, hoping we'll get some kind of announcement on that one next week. Still nothing really in terms of the centre-forward position. There's been some reports over the last few days suggesting that Gyökeres is the one that Arsenal are now moving for. But again, we've heard that before. And then we've had stuff that has come out and completely contradicted that, pointing us in the direction of Benjamin Sesko. So, look, the truth is, with those attacking signings, especially the centre-forward one, we don't really know what's happening. There is an attacking signing on the cards that we're hearing quite a bit about at the moment, and we've got to cover this one in a lot of detail today because we've been talking about it in passing. I've mentioned how I feel about the idea of Arsenal signing Noni Madueke before. We've covered it maybe 5-6 times now, just briefly. And I think people that have been watching or listening will know that it's not a signing that excites me. And I guess my worry about this window at the moment, and I'm always aware of the fact that that can change, right? But I guess my feeling on the window so far, and it is just a feeling at the time of recording, is that it's all a little bit underwhelming. You know, I didn't expect us to go and break the bank and bring in a second choice goalkeeper that was going to get me excited. So I'm fine with the Kepa Arrizabalaga thing. I've said before, I'm a little bit underwhelmed with Christian Norgaard. I hope he proves me wrong. Zubimendi, I like, and I think is a good signing, a very good signing, and a signing that will excite a lot of Arsenal fans, given his reputation and all the rest of it. But for me, you know, I'm still looking at him and going, okay, you know, you got the ability, and there's certainly a lot of quality there, but you're going to have to really hit the ground running for us to kind of feel the benefit of you arriving, and for people to get really fully on board with it nice and early. Because, you know, we can't afford to lose ground. We need those that are coming in to replace members of our previous starting 11, which is exactly what's happening with Martin Zubimendi now. We need them to come in and really kind of get going straight away. I think it's really, really important. So that's where there's a bit of pressure and a little bit of uncertainty around Zubimendi for me. I think in the long run and looking further down the line, there's no doubt that we'll look at it and go, good signing. But I just think it's about how quickly he can adapt. And we've got a difficult start to the season, which doesn't help in that sense. The striker thing, I mean, if we end up with one of Sesko or Gyökeres, I don't think I'm going to sit there rubbing my hands together or jumping up and down. Not because I don't think they'll be good additions to the team, but just because this is dragged on for such a long time. It's a buzzkill, isn't it? It is. So if I sat here and said I'm like massively excited about what the window's brought us so far, I'd be lying. If we were to get one of those strikers in and then do a real big statement type deal, like the Rodrygo deal, for example, I'll probably feel very, very differently. But we haven't done anything like that yet. So that's where I am in terms of kind of just taking stock of how I feel about the window so far. We're going to take loads of your comments and loads of your questions throughout today's show. Really, really looking forward to hearing from you guys as well. So keep them coming. I'll ask for questions a little bit later on in the show so that they don't get lost in the chat box. But yeah, really, really conflicted, I got to say, about this Noni Madueke stuff. Look, we'll get to that in a bit. Let's leave that. That's our main story. We'll cover that off in great detail a little bit later on down the show. Lots of hellos, because there's lots and lots of you joining us live right now on both YouTube and on X. Amazing to see so many people tuning in bright and early on a Sunday morning. If you are with us on YouTube and you haven't done so already, please leave us a like. That really, really does help. Don't like the chat, like the video itself, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. That stuff really, really does help. If you're watching us on X, thank you. Good to have you here, but we're not going to stream every episode on X. So if you want to keep up to date with the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast, tune in for all our shows and keep across all the stuff that we make here, then please do come over to the Chronicles of a Gooner YouTube channel and subscribe, or you can subscribe to the show on Apple, Spotify, and all other major podcast stores as well. Right, let's get into our first story, which is concerning a certain young man that we at Arsenal are very, very fond of, and that is Ethan Nwaneri. Okay, so there was a fair bit of panic when I was scrolling through social media last night from Arsenal fans who fear off the back of a report in which it was claimed that Chelsea have an interest in Ethan Nwaneri, that Arsenal could lose the starlet this summer. Now, let's put this all into context, okay? So the report that came out said Chelsea do hold an interest in the player, and it was kind of to the effect of they'll be there if he fails to agree a new contract with Arsenal, if Arsenal fail to tie him down. As far as I'm aware, Ethan Nwaneri's priority is to remain at Arsenal. Okay, Ethan Nwaneri's done this before, and it's not even Ethan Nwaneri. I guess it's his representatives. I guess it's his sort of team and the people working around him. They are quite happy, as we discussed on yesterday's show, to go to the kind of 11th hour when it comes to negotiations to get the best possible deal for their client. And why wouldn't they? That's absolutely the right thing to do if you're representing Ethan Nwaneri. Remember when he was going to sign the last time? You know, there was all this talk of Chelsea and Manchester United and other clubs. And in the end, we managed to tie him down, which was great. And the reason we were able to do that was because Ethan Nwaneri, who's come through at Arsenal, ultimately wants to play for Arsenal Football Club. Things have changed a little bit because Ethan Nwaneri's stock has risen. He's come into the first team. He's shown not just us at Arsenal what he's capable of, but he's shown the wider footballing world as well that he's a really, really talented young man. He's got a wonderful left foot, brilliant when he cuts inside onto it from those kind of right-sided positions. He came into the team at a really critical point in Arsenal's season, playing on the right-hand side, and I thought did a really, really good job. He's shown that he can play in those more central areas, the right half spaces. And I think a lot of people would tell you that that's probably the more natural fit for Ethan Nwaneri, the kind of Martin Odegaard type role. He's an extremely good finisher, very, very, very clinical in and around the box, I think, and has this amazing ability of finding the corners with that left foot, sometimes with very, very little backlift. He's a really, really exciting player. And Arsenal have to do everything within their power to keep him. And I'm sure they will. Okay. But negotiations are negotiations. This is how they work. Until the situation gets critical, you're probably not going to get as many concessions from the two sides when it comes to terms and when it comes to finding that agreement. Now, the report that came out from The Athletic just a few days ago was that these talks are at a delicate stage. And obviously, the term is probably the term that was provided to the journalist. I think it was James McNicholas who sourced the story. And so if that's what's told to you, that's what you've got to report. That's what you've got to go with. But I think as a journalist, you've got this amazing ability to kind of create and stir reactions by putting out stories, but you don't have any power whatsoever about the way that certain words are interpreted. And I think the word delicate led to a lot of people interpreting this as, oh my God, we're at that critical stage where it could go one way or the other, where it could be Nwaneri signs this bumper Arsenal deal for the next 5 years and happy days. You know, it's great. We move forward with him as one of ours, and we give him that opportunity to grow with Arsenal, and we all develop together and we all enjoy the ride. Or he could just go, F this, I'm going to go somewhere else where I'm going to play a much bigger role and a much bigger part, and I'm maybe going to get more money. I think people were kind of overreacting to the use of the term delicate. That was my opinion on it at the time. And I think what this speaks to actually is how much people in Arsenal circles rate Ethan Nwaneri. The fear of losing him has created this drama and this anxiety that only exists around players that you really do want to keep. And I think what this has done is shone a light for me on how impressed everybody around Arsenal has been with Ethan Nwaneri, what a valuable asset he is because of that relationship with the supporters, obviously one of our own, come through the academy, etc., etc. But also, it kind of shows his value, doesn't it? It just does. And I think for me, at this stage, I'm not worried about Ethan Nwaneri leaving. I think Arsenal will get this done. And I think the Chelsea interest, yeah, fine. Chelsea admire a lot of players. And we know that Chelsea specifically quite like to go around and bring in young players, don't they? Talented young footballers. That's been their kind of model of operation for a little bit of time now. And so you shouldn't be surprised by that, nor should you fear it, because if Arsenal do their thing, if Arsenal do their bit, I'm very, very confident that we will keep hold of Ethan Nwaneri. And this anxiety and stress and frustration that everybody seems to be feeling at the moment, it will just disappear. We've been really good at negotiating new contracts with key players over the course of the last few seasons. From that, you should take encouragement that Arsenal will be able to execute that again and get this deal done. The big talking point around Ethan Nwaneri and what's said to be the thing that's kind of, if at all, creating this maybe delicate situation, to use that phrase, between Arsenal and Ethan Nwaneri is probably the question around his game time. Now, I found it really interesting last season that despite the injuries and the problems that we had, Arsenal protected Ethan Nwaneri maybe a little bit more than I expected them to. And I remember when Martin Odegaard picked up his injury, and he was out for a good few months. And I remember looking at that midfield and thinking, man, we just really, really do lack creativity at the moment. We really struggle in that department. I'm not sure how we make up, how we make up for the fact that, Martin Odegaard is absent and it's having a real big impact on our team. And I remember at the time thinking, do you throw Ethan Nwaneri in? We'd seen flashes and glimpses of Ethan Nwaneri before. We kind of had an idea and an inkling of how good a player he was. And I remember people saying, throw him in. Odegaard's out, throw Nwaneri in. And I remember my feeling on that at the time being quite strong the other way. I felt like if you brought Ethan Nwaneri in at such a young age, he would have been, 17 at the time. I felt that if you brought Ethan Nwaneri in and said, you have to do what Martin Odegaard does, and whether you put that responsibility on him as bluntly and as directly as that is another question. But the fact that he would have been playing in Martin Odegaard's role would have put a lot of pressure on the young man. And we know the scrutiny that Arsenal are under all of the time. There's no way that if he failed to live up to those expectations, failed to perform, failed to impact the team, that Arsenal fans, not all Arsenal fans, but we know that the general noise and the kind of narrative around it would have been like, well, this kid ain't really as good as he's cracked up to be, is he? Rather than people taking that sensible approach of saying, well, this is a 17-year-old who's been thrust into the picture to try and make up for the fact that our captain is missing. I thought Arteta was right at the time to rely on his more experienced players to try and help fill that gap and fill that void. And we did it in different ways over the course of last season. We did it in various ways. Sometimes we were playing with two up front, Trossard and Havertz. Sometimes we were playing it in a slightly different way. Sometimes we were playing with a double pivot with, the midfield shape being slightly adjusted. So, look, I think for me, at that point, Mikel and Arsenal were right to protect Ethan Nwaneri. And also, it's not just about the here and then. It's about what happens further down the line, right? So let's say that Ethan Nwaneri came in. It didn't work. 3-4 games into this run where you're without Martin Odegaard and Ethan Nwaneri is tasked with replacing him, you think that the team is suffering. Do you then take the 17-year-old back out and potentially risk damaging his confidence, or do you slowly and gradually, sort of bring him in, and when the time is right, he will get his opportunity to shine, he'll get his moment to shine? In the end, we had no choice, and we ended up putting him out on the right-hand side. And I've always felt, and Arsene Wenger really felt this as well, clearly, because he used to do something very, very similar. When you're bringing a young player through, he used to say and used to believe that actually using him in a wider area where they've maybe got slightly less defensive responsibility is a good way to sort of bed them in. And we did that with Ethan Nwaneri, and we got a lot out of him. We did. We got goals, we got assists, we got fantastic bits of play. He wasn't the most natural fit because, he wasn't going to take people on the outside. I know Saka is always renowned for coming in on that left-hand side, but he does have that ability to go on the outside. It's something that he's certainly added to his game in recent times. So yeah, look, I think for me, I think we handled him well, and we handled his development well up until a certain point. Because when we got to the real back end of the season, things seemed to change a little bit with Ethan Nwaneri. And I'm not sure why that was the case. He'd gone from like playing loads of minutes during that period of time, doing really well, scoring goals, providing assists. And then we got to sort of like April time, and he played 4 minutes against Crystal Palace, 4 minutes against Bournemouth, was an unused sub against Liverpool and Newcastle. And then came back into the side and got 75 minutes against Southampton. So the end of the season for Ethan Nwaneri, I think, was probably a little bit underwhelming. And I don't know why that is. I don't know whether Arsenal felt that physically he was struggling a little bit, that he needed to kind of be reined in a little bit. But if there are question marks around minutes and around what his role is going to look like next season, I would suspect, and it is just my feeling and nothing more than that, that those questions and those doubts about what his role will look like next season are a consequence of the way he was kind of sidelined a little bit towards the end of our season. Let me know what you think on that. I know people saying, Oslo Gunnar says Nwaneri looked burnt out. That's why we took him out of the firing line. I think you're probably right. I think you're probably right. If I'm having to hazard a guess as to why that was, that's probably what I'd go with. But at the same time, I think as a young man who probably isn't as experienced as he's going to be in a few years' time, who probably has had that taste of being a regular first teamer and then struggles with the idea of that sort of being taken away, I think you might look at that and think, hold on a minute, where am I going here? What's this going to look like for me in 12 months' time? And if you're hearing that we're being linked with a right winger rather than a left winger, and you feel like the reason, or one of the reasons you have a good chance of playing minutes is because you can fill two positions potentially. You can play in Odegaard's role, but you can also go out and play on that right-hand side. If someone else is coming in to play on that right-hand side and play second fiddle to Bukayo Saka, you might think that that's going to impact you. So again, we're just going by the reports. The reports say that Chelsea are interested. The reports also say that Arsenal, if you update those reports a little bit and fast forward to this morning rather than what was being said last night, it looks like those talks with Arsenal and Nwaneri are quite advanced and quite strong and moving in the right direction. But there is that question about minutes for Ethan Nwaneri. And, earlier in the summer, there were suggestions that he could be sent out on loan. I don't want to see that happen. I think he's good enough to help us. I think he's good enough to impact at Arsenal. But if you're looking at the idea of, for example, Noni Madueke coming in, which we're going to cover off in a bit, of course, in more detail, you might be thinking, well, that's one of the positions I stand to potentially get minutes in. And if Noni Madueke comes in, what does that do for me? So if he wants clarification around what the plan is in terms of signings, around what the plan is specifically related to him, you can understand that. But I don't think that we're at the stage right now where we have to really worry about Ethan Nwaneri and him staying on. I think he will stay on, and I think we'll be absolutely fine when it comes to keeping a hold of him. Okay, short pause. When we come back, we're going to talk Rodrygo, and then we're going to move on to that main story of Noni Madueke. Big update there. I just want to share with you guys a clip from one of our recent scouting videos, just to give you guys a taster of what we're going to be doing over on Patreon for the next few weeks. I know lots of people have been enjoying the content recently. I've had lots and lots of you signing up. So a big thank you to everybody who's recently become a patron and to those who continuously support us here at the Chronicles of a Gooner. We did release a video on Eze yesterday, I think it was. Was it yesterday or the day before? We released a scouting video on Eze, which is out there. You can find it on Patreon. The link is in the description below. But annoyingly, when I went to cut out the clip to share a little teaser with you guys today, I've just realized when I was about to click on it that I've exported the video in the wrong resolution. So it's going to look all funny for our YouTube viewers. So what I'll do is I'll share you a clip of the Norgaard scouting video. We're thinking that Christian Norgaard will probably be an Arsenal player next week. So I'll share you that clip, and I promise on the next episode, we'll share you the Eze clip. I will have exported it in the right resolution. But this is a teaser and an idea of what we're doing over on Patreon. If you wish to sign up, you can do via the link in the description. Here's a clip from our Christian Norgaard scouting video. For someone like Christian Norgaard, this is what I'm more interested in. You know, what can he do moving forward? I know he can defend. I know he can destroy. I know he can break up play. But in our case, we're going to be in a lot of situations where we're trying to break opposition down and not vice versa. And so, yes, you know, hopefully he can help us be a little bit more transition resistant. We tend to face transitional teams nowadays. And if he can do that, that'll be great. But I think for me, the big question mark is what can he give us going forward? And here you're seeing him bite back, prevent danger. We're seeing a lot of that. We're seeing him win the ball here high up and then laying it off to the likes of Brian and Mbumo, who's also on his way out of Brentford, by the way. I fear for them, I have to say, losing him, losing Norgaard, and having already lost Thomas Frank as well. Here he is picking the pocket and then just helping it into the path of a Danish teammate. Here again, look, he watches the run from outside to in, just anticipates and picks his moment as to when to kind of bite. There you go. So that gives you an idea of what our scouting videos look and feel like at the moment over on Patreon. So if you're interested, patreon.com/Chronicles of a Gooner, get involved. Okay, before we move on to the Rodrygo story, I'm going to ask you guys, if you're watching us on YouTube, to please leave a like on the video. Not in the chat box, but on the video. There is over 2,000 people watching us live right now, which is incredible, across YouTube and X. If you're on X, come over to YouTube, give us a subscribe on Apple or Spotify if you prefer as well. But if you're on YouTube, we need those likes. So let's drive them up. With that many of you watching us on YouTube, it's like, what, 700-ish? We should no doubt have about 300-400 likes on the board by now. So come on, please. I hate asking, but it really, really does help. Right. Shall we talk Rodrygo? Yeah. The Rodrygo saga rumbles on and on and on. He deleted his match day tweet after being left out of Real Madrid's side again to face Borussia Dortmund in the quarterfinal of their Club World Cup campaign. I mean, I'm not normally the guy that reads into that type of thing too much, but it's clear that there's something between Rodrygo and Real Madrid right now that isn't right. And when we did our transfer rumor rating pod, God, it must have been a couple of weeks ago now, one of the things I kept saying when we were assessing the likelihood of Rodrygo coming to Arsenal was that this is something that needs to be driven by the player. We need Rodrygo to be pushing hard to get out of Real Madrid. We need Real Madrid to have essentially had enough of him, to the point where, you know, they're open to a sale. And if Rodrygo pushes hard enough and Real Madrid are sick and tired of the ongoing drama behind the scenes, we could see ourselves getting this deal done at a much more favorable price. Now, we're still going to pay top dollar for Rodrygo, regardless of how this goes down over the next few weeks. But, if you can put Real Madrid in a position where they're willing to come to the table for sort of like, I don't know, 80 million euros, then, that is a much better position to be in as Arsenal Football Club. And maybe, just maybe, that makes the deal affordable and far more likely to materialize. So things like that, they're interesting, and people are going to be, of course, reacting to that type of thing. And the more often it happens, the more you start to think, well, hold on, maybe there is an issue here. Xabi Alonso says he hopes that Rodrygo can come back to his best form. That's what he kind of said, I think, after the game, which suggests that he doesn't feel that right now Rodrygo's playing well enough to be in that starting 11. And listen, if Xabi Alonso says that, a very renowned and well thought of coach, then maybe that does trigger a bit of a thought in my mind as to, why Rodrygo is being left out. It isn't just Xabi Alonso has another preference. He clearly feels that Rodrygo isn't performing at the level that he's capable of. He's never closed the door on Rodrygo or tried to push him out of the back door. He's not done any of that, Xabi Alonso, but he's sending some very, very clear messages, I think, in order to give people the context around his selection. You could argue that Rodrygo is not playing very well, or maybe not training very well, because he's not happy and he wants out. And that shouldn't mean that us as Arsenal fans, we look at him and go, he's a bad apple, blah, blah, blah. We've seen this before. Lots of times we've seen players unhappy, pushing for moves, just kind of dropping the ball a little bit in terms of their performances, with lots of other stuff going on in the background. We've seen how off the field stuff at our own club can impact players in terms of their performances and stuff. I mean, look how much was made of maybe Martin Odegaard's dip around the time that he became a new parent. So, we're not completely oblivious to that type of stuff. But yeah, I would really like Rodrygo to come to Arsenal. I really, really would. And I think that, I'm starting to feel that this is a little bit more likely as the weeks go on. But financially, it's a big deal to do, not just in terms of what we're going to pay, but in terms of the contract. And that kind of leads me on to why I don't feel so comfortable with another deal that we're hearing loads about, and that is a deal potentially for Noni Madueke. But we'll get to that in just a second. There's one more bit of information I want to just share with you guys on Rodrygo, and it is from the ever brilliant Hand of Arsenal, who said that Rodrygo has told some people who are working for Saudi clubs and were trying to get a feel for the Rodrygo situation over a potential move to Saudi Arabia. He has told them in no uncertain terms that if he leaves Real Madrid, the priority is the Premier League and Arsenal. So that gives us some encouragement, doesn't it? That gives us reason to be excited. But again, it's if he leaves Real Madrid. So I think we're gonna see or get a feel for how likely this is in the coming weeks. I really, really do. But this could easily be the type of deal that rolls over into the new season and goes right down to the wire. And the reason I say that is because, being left out of the Club World Cup, okay, it's not ideal. Going into pre-season, there'll be lots of rotation. There'll be players in, players out, players being tried and tested in new positions, particularly because Real Madrid have got a new manager in Xabi Alonso, who's still getting his feet under the table and will want to understand, what he's got and how he can utilize certain players and their skill sets. But I think if you go into the La Liga season and the situation remains the same, I think that's when you're probably more likely to see Rodrygo really kind of pushing for a move. But if Arsenal go and do business before that restricts them in their capacity to go out and sign a player like Rodrygo, I'm telling you now, there's going to be a lot of frustration among the supporters. And the deal that I'm talking about that could potentially restrict us in that sense is the deal for Noni Madueke. Noni Madueke looks as though he could well become an Arsenal player in this transfer window, I'm not sure how I feel about it. In fact, I know what my gut feel is. I tried to analyze it in as fair a way as possible. And when I conduct that analysis, and I wrote some notes this morning when I was sort of scribbling down on the page preparing for the podcast, and I tried to kind of play the other side of the argument. I tried to play devil's advocate a little bit. I tried to put myself in the shoes of the football club and understand why Noni Madueke seemingly is such an attractive proposition to Arsenal and Arteta. And I've got some reasons why I think that might be the case. Not sure on a personal level, though, I really buy into them. But we'll get into that next. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. Don't go anywhere. Make sure you like the video if you're with us on YouTube, not the chat, the video. Make sure you like it. It really, really does help. Make sure you subscribe to the Chronicles of a Gooner on Apple or Spotify, etc., etc. And we'll be back after this really short pause to talk Noni Madueke at length and in great detail.
You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe.
That's right. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast with me, Harry Symeou. Like and subscribe and all the rest of it. Okay. Noni Madueke. Look, if you had said to me at the start of the summer, Harry, I want you to write down a list of all the wingers that interest you. And I want this to be quite a big list, an expansive list. I want you to write down 15 names. I wouldn't have written Noni Madueke's name down for a couple of reasons. Okay. First of all, I didn't think him leaving Chelsea was on the cards. Second of all, I think that his best position is on the right wing. And I'd imagine that if you played for a club like Chelsea, that you probably wouldn't be content with playing second fiddle to somebody like Bukayo Saka. And there's just no way that Noni Madueke is as good as Bukayo Saka. So that's what his role would entail. I've always felt that the need has been greater on the left-hand side for us. I think we talk a lot about Saka backup, and people are right to make this point online. I've seen a lot of this morning, people saying for years and years and years, we've been complaining about Arsenal not having the backup to Bukayo Saka. Then Bukayo Saka gets that long-term injury as a result of probably being overplayed and over-relied upon. And now that Arsenal are being linked with one, people are throwing their toys out of the pram and complaining about it. I just don't see a world in which Noni Madueke comes to Arsenal and goes, yeah, do you know what? I'll play second fiddle to Bukayo Saka. Because if Noni Madueke was happy coming in and out of the team, why wouldn't he just stay at Chelsea, where he's settled, where he's comfortable, where he's impacted already? Okay, Arsenal is a step up in that Arsenal have been title challengers in the last few years and Chelsea have been nowhere near that. Yes, it's a step up, but is it a reduction in his role? That's what I'm struggling to deal with. Make the argument then for Madueke to play on the left-hand side. I'm not sure he'd be as effective there. Certainly gives you an option, but I'm not sure he'd be as effective there. I think as fans, for a while, we've all been barking up the wrong tree. We've all been looking at the winger situation and going, it's got to be someone that plays on the left. And actually, Arsenal's intention all along, as has been reported on a few occasions, is that no, actually, it's about bringing someone in that can play on both sides. Okay, so then the next question is, that player is not going to be equally as good on both sides. There's very few players out there like that. So do you prioritize someone who's better at playing on the right but can play on the left, or do you get someone who's better at playing on the left but can play on the right? These are all really, really interesting questions around Noni Madueke and around Arsenal's pursuit of winger. I think, look, when I did my little bit of kind of brainstorming this morning and I tried to put myself in the shoes of the football club, I could understand thinking about the reasons why Arsenal would look at Noni Madueke. Okay. We keep talking about this Premier League proven thing. Noni Madueke is that. He can impact football matches in the Premier League. No question about that. He's now an England international as well. So he's progressed. He's developing. He's got great quick feet, tricky player, able to beat men. All things that I think we're missing in this team and we could do with more of. Loves cutting in on that left foot, which means that if he did play and share some minutes with Bukayo Saka, we probably wouldn't have to change our model too much in terms of the spaces that he occupies, the spaces that we find him in, and how the team shapes up, because he would have that natural similarity to Bukayo in that he is going to try and pull as wide as possible, get on the ball, and then he's going to want to carry the ball infield and make things happen. He can finish. I think he can finish. I don't think there's any question about that. I think his touch is a little bit heavy at times. That's one thing that I've struggled with. But sometimes with that chaos comes product, in that with that chaos, with the ability to attract people into you, with the ability to skip by people, with the ability sometimes to just play off the cuff, you can cause danger in the opposition's defensive third. And I think when I've been talking about Eze, for example, I keep talking about unpredictability being something that we need more of. Noni Madueke gives you that. He's quick. He's up to speed with the Premier League. He's got the physical attributes, I think, that that we kind of benefit from adding to the squad. I don't think it's like the worst idea in the world. And I've said this consistently. If he comes in as our third attacking signing of the summer, so let's say we get the striker that we want, and then we go and get, I don't know, we go and get, look, we're not going to get a Rodrygo and a Madueke. I personally don't think. I think it's too much money to outlay, and therefore I think the club would not do that. Okay? Maybe can't do that. Who knows? But if he came in as a third attacking signing, and I include Eze, by the way, as a third attacking signing. So let's say we got a striker in, Eberechi Eze, and then Noni Madueke, I'd go, okay, I feel a bit better about this. But when I go over this in my head over and over and over and over again, the only way this move makes any sense to me whatsoever is if we get Noni Madueke for circa 20 to 25 million pounds. Now, that doesn't feel realistic. When we heard David Ornstein speaking about it the other day, he said that it would take probably more than 45 million pounds. He said that he'd heard some people quoting Chelsea's asking price as even higher. Can we benefit maybe from what Enzo Maresca has had to say recently? In fact, after their game the other night, when he was asked about Noni Madueke, he said, look, we don't want players here that don't want to be a part of this team and don't want to be a part of the group. Is that why Arsenal have gone down the road that they have in terms of the way they've gone about this? Because the latest update is, and this has come from David Ornstein, that Arsenal have agreed personal terms with Noni Madueke. It's done. He's open to joining Arsenal. He'd love to join Arsenal. And all we need to do now is engage in club-to-club talks in the hope that we can get this done and in the hope that we can reach some sort of agreement. Are Arsenal playing on the fact that Enzo Maresca's got a very, very firm policy of, if you don't want to be here, see you later? And we saw Enzo Maresca, when he first took over at Chelsea, come in and be very, very ruthless, didn't he? He said to the club, look, if you're trusting me to do this job, if you're giving me the responsibility of getting this team back into the Champions League, you got to listen to me, man. And, in the end, he delivered. And he delivered the Conference League as well. That gives him a little bit more clout and a little bit more power, I'd imagine, behind the scenes at Stamford Bridge. But, he was very quick to bin a load of players that he didn't feel. Bin's probably a horrible way of putting it, but you get what I'm saying. He was very quick to say with a lot of players, I don't want you. You're out. See you later. You might have been somebody that the club spent a lot of money on, but you don't work for me. You don't fit into the bigger picture for me. And so see you later. So if Noni Madueke's agreed personal terms with Arsenal and walks into the room and says, I want to go to Arsenal, that strengthens probably our negotiating position, because Chelsea will want to be seen to be, making sure that they stick to that principle of, if you don't want to be here, you're gone. But at the same time, they're not going to let him go on the cheap, because he's on some ridiculously long contract, as are pretty much all of their players that they sign these days, because that's the way that Chelsea do business. Let's have a look. 23-year-old Noni Madueke. When does his current contract at Chelsea expire? 2030. Still 5 years to go on that contract. So you ain't going to get him cheap. And therefore, my overall opinion on this is that it just doesn't make sense. I can't sit here and try and spin this in a positive way. And people always accuse me of that. They always say, oh, why do you spin things? No, it's not spin, right? For me, I personally prefer to approach life in the way where I give people the benefit of the doubt. And I don't like the idea of being outraged about things that haven't happened yet and things that haven't gone wrong yet, because ultimately, you just spend a lot of time in your life being pissed off about stuff that sometimes A, never happens, and B, is never a problem. And I just, as I've grown up, I've realized that's not the way to live life. That's not the way to do it. It's not the way I choose to do it. If some people like to do that and they like to vent in their anger, fine. But it's not me. It's not my approach. It's not me trying to put a spin on it. But even if I wanted to spin this into a positive, I just don't think I can. And as I posted on X yesterday, my opinion on whether the Madueke deal is a good or bad one will be largely dependent on how much we pay for him. Get him in for 20, 25 million pounds, maybe even 30 million pounds, because the market is crazy these days. And I'll turn around and I'll say, do you know what? Not the worst bit of business. Because I don't completely dislike Noni Madueke, the player. I think he can impact teams. I do. I think he's got a lot going for him. But if we're talking about the potential of signing Rodrygo, if we're talking about the fact that we've got two strikers right now that we really want to sign, neither of whom we can get close enough to the asking price for at the time of recording, but then we go and spend 40 million, 45 million on Noni Madueke, I'm going to sit there and go, well, was that the priority? And was that the best use of funds? And I'd be right to ask that question. So would everybody else that asks that question. But for me, if you can nab him cheap, I'm fine with it. Or at least I'm not annoyed about it. Is probably a better way of putting it. I will sit back and accept it, and we'll see how it plays out. If you're paying 40 million, 45 million, then there's no way that you can dress that up as a good bit of business. Based on what we know now, based on what we know so far. There'll always be that thing in the back of my mind that there are other players that Mikel Arteta and Arsenal have signed over the years that I looked at and said very similar things with regards to. But in the end, some of those players turned out to be really good additions and really good assets, and actually enabled us to level up and get to the place where we're now competing. So, yeah, I think that's kind of where I'm going to leave it on Noni Madueke as far as my opinion goes. Just to quickly summarize, get the right deal, and this optically looks a lot better. The optics are massively impacted by the fact that he plays for Chelsea, and we've been, for whatever reason, very keen to buy players from Chelsea in recent years. And some have gone okay, some have gone really badly. So, yeah, I mean, I said it at the beginning, the window has not gone as excitingly as I hoped the early stages of it would. I can still feel excited by the end of the window, and I hope I do. But, we still haven't got the striker in. And I know it's not about who you sign first. It's about what you end up with at the end. And I get that. But it just doesn't feel like the greatest use of funds, because we all know that Chelsea are going to want a lot of money for him. And that's where I would be personally put off by it. Anyway, we'll take another short pause. When we come back, we're going to take your questions and thoughts from the live chat. So start getting them in now. I'd love to hear from you guys. I'd love to get your thoughts on Madueke, on all the other stuff as well that we've been discussing on today's show. Don't forget to like the video, not the chat, the video itself. There's nearly 1,000 of you with us live on YouTube right now, and there's only 200 likes on the board. That come on, let's get it to 500. Let's try and hit 1,000 likes on the video overall as a target. That would be amazing. On X, there's nearly 2,000 of you with me live at the moment, which is incredible. If you haven't done so already, come over to the Chronicles of a Gooner YouTube channel. Give us a subscribe. Subscribe on Spotify or Apple if you prefer. I'd love to have you as part of the Chronicles of a Gooner family, and we'll take your questions and thoughts right after this. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner pod. Okay, hi ho, into the live chat we go. Sadiq says, Chelsea paid 35 million euros, which is 30.2 million pounds. Chelsea are not making a loss. Forget about the 20 to 35 million pound range. They'll make a profit. Keep up the good work, Harry. Yeah, I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying. But Chelsea also do this thing, don't they, with the amortization, where they give players these extremely long contracts. And so if they paid 35 million euros for him, a couple of years ago now, and they sell him for something similar a couple of years down the line, actually, they haven't made a loss, because that 35 million pounds would have been spread in their eyes across the contract length, which was 10 years. So Noni Madueke, in that perspective, is costing them £3.5 million a year. So if you take it, if he's been there 2 years, I don't know if it's exactly 2 years, I'm just guessing off the top of my head right now, then that would have been, they would have essentially lost £7 million on Noni Madueke. His value would have decreased by £7 million. So then to sell him for the same as what they bought him would actually not be seen in an accounting world as a loss. It's an interesting point, but that's how I view it. And that's why I believe Chelsea have gone down the route they have with the long contracts and the amortization and all the rest of it. Let's see what else we've got. The Pundit 99 obviously doesn't like what I'm saying in the live chat. Mate, you don't have to type in caps like a baby and repeat your point 100 times. If it hasn't been read out once, it ain't going to be read out again. So save yourself the effort, man, of the angry typing in caps lock. Anyway, Jamal says, since Arsenal are moving with a lot of secrecy in the transfer market, how do we know it's between Sesko and Gyökeres? The truth is we don't for sure. But obviously we're gravitating towards those players as fans and as supporters, because those are the two that we're hearing the most about. And I do think there's never any smoke without fire. So, I think that those who are reporting on those two strikers will be well informed, will be quite confident of the interest. I do think it's really interesting, because I think both of those situations have been reported in very different ways. I feel like the reporting around Sesko has been very vague, because nobody seems to really have an understanding of what exactly is going on. We've heard of a price point that RB Leipzig would be willing to sell at and an amount that they'd like to achieve. That could have come from RB Leipzig, could have come from an agent. We don't know, but we've not heard much else about that. I've even tried myself to get in touch with Benjamin Sesko's agent. I was successful in getting in touch. I wasn't successful in getting any information out of him, though. Fair play to him. He's doing the right things and keeping it quiet and doing right by his client. With Gyökeres, it feels like a lot of the reports are agent-led, are being pushed out by the agent. And so we've got two very different circumstances. One player's team of representatives are all over this, and they think that the best way of getting that move for their client is to go really big and really public and try and force it. And you've got another set of representatives in Sesko's corner who are just looking at it all very, very differently, and are keeping very quiet, maybe because they're not at a point where they're willing to upset the apple cart to make it all happen. They think that their players got a value, and if Arsenal don't meet their value, maybe they're not interested. I don't know. But the point I'm trying to make is that so much of the reporting has been vague. Other parts of the reporting are quite clearly agent-driven, in my personal opinion. And so you end up in a space where we know of the interest, but we don't know a great deal else. And so I wouldn't be surprised if another name was to emerge, maybe a name out of the blue. And if so, that would really speak to your point, Jamal, that Arsenal are working in the shadows in a lot of cases. But the name that I think is still an option, and I don't think is going away, and again, a bit like the Madueke signing, I'd imagine there'll be a lot of people quite upset about this, is Ollie Watkins. I'm not as anti-Ollie Watkins as a lot of Arsenal fans are, but I also understand that if the club have kept their powder dry in the striker market for a long, long time with the view to finding the right guy. And then they go and bring you a player who's at a stage in his career where he doesn't feel like a long-term signing. As they go get a player that isn't necessarily a glamorous one and all the rest of it. I can understand why people feel a little bit underwhelmed by that, but we'll have to wait and see. But to answer your point, I've gone around the houses. I don't think it's beyond the realms of possibility that we go and get someone that nobody thought of. Junior Gunner says this club have shown time and time again that they don't have ambition, shopping in Chelsea's reduced section whilst plugging holes in the squad with bang average players. Thoughts on Mikel Arteta's talent ID? I had to take a sip of the coffee for this one because this is a question that look, I understand where it's coming from, but also I think there's some really good counter arguments to these points. So let's do that now. The club have shown time and time again that they don't have ambition. That's the beginning of Junior Gunner's statement / question. I think they've also shown ambition at times. They went and spent north of £100 million to get Declan Rice in. They paid north of £60 million to get Kai Havertz in because they felt that he was a good addition to our squad. They paid £50 million for Ben White, who wasn't as well regarded a player, nowhere near it, in fact, as he is today at the time. They overpaid for Aaron Ramsdale to get him in. They went and spent money on William Saliba, well ahead of him becoming a top centre-back because they believed and they thought that he could move in the right direction and eventually get there. There are examples of where I would argue that Arsenal maybe have lacked that ambition and that willingness to go and spend and take the risk in the gamble. But there are also examples of where they have. So I think that point or that argument is a very nuanced one. Shopping in Chelsea's reduced section. When a team like Chelsea go out and stockpile so many of the game's best young players over the course of 2-3 summers, I don't think it gives us reason to constantly go shopping there, but it does tell you that, you know, there is players there to be had. And because their squad is so overinflated and overblown, there will be opportunities. There will be players that are better than what they're able to show at Chelsea because they don't get regular game time. Madueke has been in and out of the team, so maybe that's how Arsenal are looking at it. But in the past, we've definitely gone and shopped from Chelsea's reduced section. So I kind of half agree with you in that that's what the feeling will be because of past actions and past transactions. But I don't think necessarily that's what we'd be doing if we got Noni Madueke. Plugging holes in the squad with bang average players. Again, I don't completely agree, but I get where people are coming from. Kepa Arrizabalaga was laughed out of Chelsea the first time around. Did go out on loan and had a good spell with Real Madrid and then did quite well at Bournemouth. And to be fair to him, has rebuilt his career to a point. But, you know, let's not beat around the bush. He's a goalkeeper that a few years ago we were pointing fingers at and going, how on earth has someone paid what Chelsea have just paid for him? It's crazy. Christian Norgaard. I'm not sure if he's going to be able to make the step up. I hope he can. I got a lot of stick for saying that I wasn't necessarily convinced that with the players we've lost versus the players that are coming in that midfield department, that in the immediate sort of aftermath of those changes, we're going to be better for it. Now, I think down the line, Zubimendi will be great. And I think, you know, we'll be fine if he's the one that holds down that 6 role moving forwards. But to sit there and say that losing 2 really strong and consistently performing number 6s to bring in one that will need to adapt and one that has never played at that level before, that's not like, it wasn't a crazy criticism. And I still to this day don't understand why so many people were. I get that people disagree with me, that's fine. But I still don't understand why I copped so much flack for that opinion. I didn't think it was outrageous. Arthur Sleep says, joining late Sunday service with the voice of reason. Welcome, my friend. Good to see you. Godson says, does the Madueke sign-in show that Arteta's job is perfectly safe no matter what happens? Again, like, that was the other point I was going to make on Junior Gunner's question. Sorry, and I forgot to do this. So I'm glad I picked this comment next. It was completely at random, but it works really well. The reason I say, or the reason I talk about Arteta, and the reason I think your point is important and is interesting, is because, you know, let's argue it the other way, right? I'm Mikel Arteta, okay, and I want Rodrygo. Rodrygo's going to cost 80, 90 million euros. Football club turns around and says, sorry, Mikel, we're not willing to pay 80 to 90 million euros for Rodrygo. So you need to look elsewhere. This is what we're willing to spend in that position. And then we have to change our approach, adapt our approach. The point I'm making is, do people believe that Mikel Arteta, if presented with the opportunity to sign Noni Madueke or Rodrygo, would go, no, not Rodrygo, not that proven multi-Champions League winning winger, Brazilian international, who has starred for Real Madrid over the years. No, not him. I'd rather get the guy that there's still a bit of a question mark over from one of our rival clubs, because I'm more interested in being proven right in terms of my recruitment than I am with being successful as Arsenal boss. Do we really believe that? And in the past, I was very much of the view that what Arteta wants, Arteta gets. And there are examples of that. You know, you look at the Aubameyang situation. Other clubs would have forced Arteta and Aubameyang to make it up. Other clubs would have been adamant that they needed to mend their relationship and move forward. Arsenal backed their manager. And in time, when you look at the way the teams developed, that's proven to be the right decision, because it helped reshape a culture that was clearly broken and cleared the space for a new one to take kind of grip, and for the team and the club to improve on the whole as a result of that. But more recently, having spent a lot of money to get into this position, we have seen Arsenal hit the brakes on things that Mikel Arteta clearly wanted. He wanted Ollie Watkins. I keep going on about this, but I do because it's important. He wanted Ollie Watkins in January. The club wouldn't spend 40, 45 million to do it. They wouldn't do it. So does he really have all the power? I think he's got a lot of power, but I still think there are things that are taken out of his hands. I really, really do. And again, I'm not saying that he's not behind the Madueke signing. I'd imagine he'd be quite a big driver in that. But at the same time, if it was a choice between him and the big spend on the bigger, more renowned and more proven player, I'm sure he'd prefer that option. It's just that, is that really realistic? Is that something that we can do? I don't know. What else have we got? The Gooner says Berta is confusing everyone, including us. For sure. And that's why, you know, it's quite clear what his strategy is. It's quite clear that he operates in a very, very different way to the way that Edu did. It's quite clear that, you know, he feels that this is the right approach, and he's going to live or die by that approach, right? That's the way it's going to go for Andrea Berta. But the fact that everybody seems to be confused, the fact that so many journalists that normally have really good, strong connections are still very, very vague in their reporting around certain targets, is probably because Berta's tightened the ship a little bit in that sense, whilst allowing certain other things to go out there to create this melodrama, if you like, and this, you know, back and forth and create situations that Arsenal can use to their advantage in terms of bargaining and all the rest of it, by seemingly agreeing terms with every attacking player in Europe ahead of the window. I don't know. But he is confusing us. And that's why you got to not get too high about this stuff and not get too low about it as well, because so much of it is just, it's just kind of smoke, not always a fire behind it, though. I mean, can you get smoke without fire? You get what I'm trying to say. That was a shit analogy, but you know what I'm trying to say. Thomas John, thank you so much for your kind donation to the channel, my friend. He says we ain't winning the league with signings like Noni. Yeah, again, it goes back to what I've said a lot over the course of the summer so far. We need needle movers. We need ceiling raisers, not floor raisers. Noni Madueke would fall into the category of signings that we made last summer, I felt, where we were improving the squad by raising the floor, but not necessarily raising the ceiling. And that was my frustration with last summer. And again, Madueke would fall into that. Let's have a look. Arthur Sleep says, could the Noni reports, the Noni Madueke reports, also be to focus Nwaneri's camp on agreeing new terms? It's a good point. I don't think Arsenal would have got to the point where they'd completely agreed personal terms with Noni Madueke if they didn't have an intention of trying to sign him. So I do expect Arsenal to make a bid. But it's an interesting point. I do think the two are linked. I do think that if I'm Ethan Nwaneri, as we touched on earlier, and I'm looking at that right-hand side as one of the areas in which I can position myself to get additional minutes, and then Madueke is coming in, I would look at that and be like, really? So I think they are linked in some way. I don't know if Arsenal are using it that way, though. So, yeah, let's see. St. Francis says, why did journalists say we can't do the Rodrygo deal because of the Club World Cup? Yet apparently we've agreed a deal with Madueke, who's also at the tournament, and Chelsea have wrapped up the Gittins move. Dortmund also at the Club World Cup and more. I don't think anybody said explicitly that no deals can be done during the Club World Cup, but I think people did report that there was a feeling that it would be easier to do these deals once the Club World Cup was out of the way. And yeah, I get what you're saying, but this is it, right? It feels like all the reporting around Arsenal, as much as there's a lot of it volume-wise, a lot of it is vague. A lot of it is very, very vague and lacks the details that kind of really convince you of their validity and their accuracy. So you got to bear that in mind. I think that's really important. I'm going to take one more. I think we've been going over the hour mark. What have we got? Just scrolling through. Sorry. Sadiq says, Harry, do we get a scouting report on Madueke? Thank you for your work. You will get over on Patreon one of our scouting videos on Noni Madueke in the coming days. And what we plan to do with those scouting videos, by the way, listen, we'll make loads of them and around players that don't end up signing for Arsenal. But when they do, we will open those videos up for 24 hours for people to watch over on Patreon. But if you want access to them now, if you want to know what we're getting before we get it, visit patreon.com/the Chronicles of Aguna. And listen, the support I've had over on Patreon in this last month has just been unbelievable. So thank you so much. It really does help during the months where there's no football, because I'm not at games every weekend covering them. I'm not commentating on matches. I'm not doing any of that stuff at the moment. So the summer can be a little bit up and down. And obviously having you guys' support over on Patreon is a massive help. But yeah, we will make some content around him. I was going to do the Mosquera one next, but I think we'll pivot and we'll do Madueke. I think the order of those scouting videos has to be quite fluid, doesn't it? Just depending on what the reports and stuff are saying. Just scrolling through, trying to pick out one or two more. Chris Electricals says, you're not honest to yourself, mate. What do you mean? Clarify, man. What have I not been honest about? Yeah, I'm not sure. Like, I just get these statements thrown at me. Like, what do you mean? TM83 says, if the club do not step up and land a starting left winger and a striker like Sesko, we're putting ourselves under huge pressure to start the season with the fixtures we have. We're setting ourselves up for a disaster of a season. Listen, going into the new season, right, we have look, going into the new season, we're under pressure already. We're under pressure to win. We're under pressure to crown off the progress that we've made with something more tangible, a trophy, a title win. And also, like, I keep having this argument with people. They keep saying it's about trophies. I could tell you now, if we win the Carabao Cup next season and nothing else, no Arsenal fan is going to be satisfied with that, like completely, because we've all felt for a number of years that this was a project being built to win the big ones. The big ones are the Premier League and the Champions League. Until we achieve one of those two things, this project isn't going to be viewed as a complete success. It's been successful in that we have gone from a position where we were miles off of being competitive to now being competitive. But until you crown it off with one of the big ones, there's always going to be that question. And with every season that we don't do that, the pressure increases. And when you don't do the transfer business that the majority feel is necessary, you are going to go into the season under even more pressure, because what has happened in the summer has created an anxiety and a worry about whether the team is actually better than it was going into the end of the last season. So yeah, let's see how it's going to go, how it's going to develop. We're under pressure, and I agree that if we don't do the business that people feel we need, that pressure is only going to be bigger, and it's only going to weigh heavier on the players, on the club, on the manager, etc., etc. So yeah, let's see how it goes. Anyway, I am going to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining me. Really do appreciate all the love and support. There's over 3,000 of you with us live right now across YouTube and X. If you are with us on YouTube, just a final request. Please do hit the like button, not in the chat, but on the video itself. There's no reason why we shouldn't have at least 500 by now. There's over 800 of you with me live right now. And if you're watching us on X, as I say, come over to the Chronicles of a Gooner on YouTube or on Apple or on Spotify and give us a subscribe. We'll be back later if there's any more breaking news. If not, I'll see you all tomorrow. Until the next one, take care of yourselves and have a wonderful Sunday. Up the Arsenal. Goodbye.